Today we're having an adventure. I'm doing something that I've never done before on such a scale. And I'm not quite sure I'm going to do it right. And this might seem weird to you, but I have 3 or 4 buckets of animal fat. Don't ask if you don't want to know where I got this from. But I want to render it down and I want to have that to put in my pantry. So done a little bit of research, and my friend told me a way to do it slowly, and just with the quantity that I have, and I don't have the time to do it slowly, so I'm going to try doing it 2 different ways. I'm going to try to do it a slow way. I'm going to do some slow and I'm going to do some a little faster. Now what I've learned is that just from my reading, is that the fat that is rendered more quickly has a stronger flavor. So it's something that you'll probably use in like cooking. So it won't really matter if it has a little bit of the flavor of the meat. But I also would like to make some just slowly, so I have a nice white, more clear fat to work with. This is sheep fat. Sometimes in the kitchen I feel like a mad scientist, but this is great. This is my laboratory. So if you want to join me, I'm going to be doing this and I'll show you my progress and we'll learn something together. I'm not afraid to make a mistake or do it wrong or whatever. I've got a lot of buckets of fat to make an error with. So I'm going to get started. So let me bring you down into my workspace here. All right, so I've got a bucket of fat right next to me here, and I've got my slow cooker on the other side here. So I might set this on minimum or maximum. Maybe what I'll do is I'll start with 2 slow cookers. I'll put one on max and one on minimum to see like how fast is fast and how slow is slow. And I already have some on the stovetop. I'll show you. This is a really slow method. I've already had it on the pot here for maybe 3 hours and nothing's really happening. So let's see that. So I filled my pot with some water and heated it up, not to boiling, but almost. And then I put this stuff in it to melt, I guess. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so let's do it. Let's do it. Okay. If you could have seen us last night in the dark with flashlights on our heads, scraping the fat off the carcass, I can tell you I've had the most adventures with my husband than anyone I've ever known. And that was one of them. So here, let's go. This is a chunk going in. We have a lot of this to do. Like, if this is too disgusting, please leave me a comment. This is real though. This is real life. This is real life. When you have a homestead and food is expensive, and this really is gold, like, isn't it? I'm going to spare you more of this disgustingness, and I'm just going to get it in my pot, and then I'll come back. When we were pulling this off the carcass, it kind of reminded me of like that Austin Powers movie with Golden Finger, you know, and he's always picking his dry skin. Well, this is the most disgusting. I think I need to put like a warning on this video. So I'll just explain. Last night with the buckets of fat, I added cold water and salt to keep it cold during the night. And I'm thinking also to infuse the fat with a bit of salt. I'm not sure. But I know the salt keeps the water colder for longer. So that was what I was told to do by my friend. Okay, now I've got 2 slow cookers rolling. One of them's on minimum and the other one is on high. low and high. And I'm just going to keep my eye on them for the next little while and see what happens. Now, I might also try on the stovetop to do that in a saucepan. I have so much, I just need to experiment, so let's go. So it is a couple hours now that I've had things on the stove and things in the slow cookers. So I decided that as I was doing this quicker method, where I have a higher heat and I'm boiling the fat, is that it really does have a stronger odor, and it just seems to me to be a more, maybe the word I would use is violent or rough, quick, rough way to do it. And I think that the end product is going to be it's going to be more yellow and cloudy. And just as I'm working with the raw fat, my hands are feeling really soft, and actually I'm thinking how much nicer it will be to have like a cleaner fat product at the end. I don't have lots of time, but I do have 2 stove tops and I have 2 slow cookers. So I'm gonna do this slowly and then I will compare the results. So what I did was I put water in with the fat. So the water is heating up and then it is melting the fat. And then when it's all melted down, I can cool it and then take that fat, that cooled fat, in more of a chunk and then take it out. This is what I'm thinking. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So I'm going to check back with you later and share my results and progress. So this is a quicker method that I'm doing in a saucepan on the stovetop. And I didn't add any water to this pan. It's all fat. And you can see that it's starting to liquefy. But it is a bit cloudy and it does have a stronger odor, like the smell of meat. Now this one is my slower method. This is a pot of fat sitting in water that I have on a very low temperature. It's like low or 1 on my stovetop. And I'm just going to stir it so you can see it's still quite heavy and thick, but it just seems like a much gentler way to soften the fat. And it just feels a lot better to me to do it this way. So I think I'm going to stick with it. So this is the slow cooker I have on very low heat. I actually turned it off of minimum and I put it on keep warm. So this isn't going to boil. I don't think it's going to just keep warm. And you can see it's getting a lot softer, and it does have water in it, like I said, and so the fat is going to float to the top and on top of the water, and then I will extract it from there. You know, at first this seemed like kind of a crazy idea or a crazy thing to be doing, but as I'm in the process, I'm actually feeling really good about it, and I'm really glad that I am doing it, because when I think about the beautiful, hopefully, the beautiful jars of fat that I'm going to have stored away in the pantry, this is amazing, because I do like to cook with lard. I do like to cook with butter, real butter, and the cost of butter is quite high. A pound of butter right now can cost anywhere between $4.99 if it's on sale to $8.99. I'm really excited to have this. It's not beef tallow and it's not pork lard, it's sheep. I'm going to call it sheep tallow, if that's the right word. I'll figure it out. It's nice because you can use it in baked goods without the odor of the meat when you do it the slow method, and you can also use it in beauty products. So I don't know, maybe if I smother my face in sheep fat, I will look 20 years younger. I don't know. These are all kinds of things I can experiment with. I keep forgetting to look at the camera. Sorry about that. Wow, my coffee mug looks really big. Well, that's even worse. It is pretty big, isn't it? It's like my whole head could fit in it. Okay, let me get you caught up to speed. This is day 2 of my sheep tallow processing, rendering. And yes, it is called sheep tallow. I did a little bit of research last night to kind of flesh out my understanding of what I'm doing here. And so I did learn that yes, this stuff is like liquid gold, and it's worth the time it takes to process it. So last night I had 2 crock pots going, one on very low and one on high. I had 1 saucepan cooking consistently, and those were what I believe is called the dry method, where you do not add water, you just boil the fat. And then I have 3 large pots of slowly rendering wet method, or the slow method, which is putting that in water and letting the water melt the fat. Apparently this way the heat spreads more evenly and it ends up in a nicer product. One thing I did learn was that salt, I came up last night to add salt, and I did leave these on the burner. I left my slow cooking ones on all through the night, just very low. And what I read was that you need to add salt to your pots of water and fat because the salt draws out the impurities. So I did that, and when I came back up, I realized, okay, well, maybe I will take my dry method, fast method saucepans and slow cooker and strain that, so then I can cool that product and see what I end up with. Now, I learned through a little bit of research that you have to process it at least 2 times to get it purified. So that's what I'm going to do. Now I want to show you what I have from yesterday. Last night I strained the 2 pots that I had. I strained them out and I put them in metal bowls, and I put that in the fridge, and now I'm left with this it looks kind of like waxy, well, it's like fatty solid. And this is one, and then this is the other one. It looks a little bit different. I don't know if you can really tell, but it's got more like brownish stuff on it. So story time. In my research last night, I learned that it's best to chop your fat really finely, or grind it if possible. You can chop it with a knife, or get the butcher to grind it, or just get it into smaller pieces. And one of the websites recommended that you use an immersion blender after the fat has been in the water for a while, or once it's been cooking for a while. You can just use your immersion blender and break it up. Well, my immersion blender suffered a bit of abuse last night because the chunks of fat that I had in my pots were too much. Like, they were really big. And I think there was a bit of like kind of connective tissue or something in there. And my immersion blender tried its very best, but it ended up overheating and smoking, and I had to stop. So what I did was I took a pair of scissors and I just started like chopping inside the pot. So I did that with all the rest of my pots. But I did, for this one that has a little more brownish in it, I did use the immersion blender, and it worked very well. So I think it was just the size of the pieces I had were smaller in that, so that seemed to work. So what I'm going to do today is reprocess these 2 that I have from the dry method that I used. So what I need to do is take this out of the bowl and then scrape off any brown residue and stuff that's on the bottom, and then put it back in the slow cooker to simmer with a bit of water, I think. I'm gonna have to double check that. So we're going to warm it up again, and then we're going to strain it again, this time through a cheesecloth or a fine piece of cotton, and try to get a more refined product. And now it doesn't have an odor, actually. Like it doesn't smell like meat at all. It doesn't really have an odor at all. So that's kind of cool. So anyway, let's get into it. So first things first, I've got to empty one of my crock pots because I've got things happening in here. I need to clean out this crock pot and prepare it to purify for the second purification of this tallow. So what I've got here is a metal bowl with a colander inside of it. I'm going to strain this slow cooked method from my other crock pot that was on just warm setting for almost, I would say 12 hours maybe. So let's go. I don't know if you can see everything, but I'm going to take my crock pot here. It's full of fatty stuff, and I'm just going to splash fat everywhere. There's a lot of big chunks in here, but you know what? I don't know if it matters. I'm just gonna get a spoon and like stir that out. Try to get as much of the liquid out as possible. Now this is all the fat that was left over from what I strained from that batch I just made. So I'm gonna just see if I can render this down further and break it up further and see if I can salvage more of the tallow. Let's see what happens. So this is the tallow that I just strained. And I've got it in a bowl. And now I'm going to put that in the fridge to cool and harden. And with these two, ignore my coffee there, but these two, I'm going to take them out of the bowls and I'm going to clean them up, and then I'm going to put them in my crock pot, which is here. And I'm going to add water and some salt, which will pull out more of the impurities. And then we're going to simmer that for an hour. So I'm going to just try to extract this. Ooh, that's nice. Look at that. How do you get that out? Oh! So I need to scrape off that brown stuff on the bottom. Do that. No, it doesn't have any odor to it. Boy, it sure looks nice. I'm just going to use my knife and I'm just going to scrape that brown stuff off. Put it there. Okay. I think it's better. I'm going to put that in my slow cooker. Bam. And now I'm going to get this one and do the same thing. See if I can do it again. I'm sure there's way better ways to do this. I think there's plenty of like tutorials on YouTube of like how to do stuff and like not waste your time. But like, when do we ever watch people like in process? Like, even screwing up. I think this is the best way to learn. I don't know. I'm gonna have to cut it out in chunks. I think I'm gonna create a new series on my YouTube channel called Tayah Tries It. Do as I say, not as I do. Tayah fails. So you don't have to. Okay. All right. Okay, this one has a lot more brown stuff on the bottom. Look at that. So I'm going to scrape this off. And this is really fun, actually. I think what I'm going to do to continue this series is once I get this figured out, I want to make some beauty products with this stuff. Just to try like a moisturizing cream, because I've read that there are vitamins and minerals and other good things in the tallow that is so good for your skin. And apparently it's very similar to the chemistry in our skin. So therefore it's really good to use as a moisturizer, and even the healing properties of it too for like diaper rash or any kind of probably eczema, things like that. I got that cleaned off. I think it looks pretty good. There's a bit in the bottom here that looks kind of clean, so I'm going to add that. It looks like coconut oil or wax, like the way it when I splashed and it went on the countertop. Now it's just like wax. It looks just like wax. I'll wash my hands and I'll show you. So this is the wax. It's like, or it's, you see? Okay, so in my slow cooker, I'm going to add some water. This I've got 4 cups. I think depending on the amount of tallow you have to purify, you add between 4 and 8 cups of water. And then I think it's around like a tablespoon. 4 cups would be like a tablespoon of salt. So I'm just gonna add a bit of salt here. I'm gonna guess. Okay, now I'm gonna plug it in and we're gonna let that melt and see what happens. So I'm using my immersion blender. It seems to be working for me today. It's not mad at me anymore. So I'm just blending up this fat. It's the remainder of the fat that I strained from my slow method and my wet method. And so I've just been cooking that on the stovetop, and right now I'm going to blend it so that the particles are smaller, and I'll cook it a little bit longer, and then I'm going to strain that. So I want to show you what I've got here. This is raw fat. I haven't done anything with it except put it in cold water and salt. And you see that it's in quite large chunks. So I'm going to, before I process this, I'm going to try to chop it up or grind it because I haven't tried that yet before I start cooking. So we'll see if it is easier or if it's not. All right, here we go. I'm gonna try something else I have never done before, and that is use my this meat grinder. It's not mine, but one day somebody brought me like 40 pounds of moose meat and brought me this at the same time. So I'm gonna try this. I need to put quite a bit in there. This is not working as efficiently as I imagined. Oh, here we go. This isn't really going to make things go any faster. It looks fun, but I don't know if I have time for this. And the mess I have to clean up after this, I don't know. No, I don't think I'm going to play with this. All right. My first batch has been purified once again through a slow cooking method. And now I'm going to put this into my measuring cup. I'm going to strain it through, there's a strainer here and a coffee filter. I'm going to try it this way. Maybe there's a better way. I have like a cotton cloth, but I don't really want to wreck it. So I think I'm going to try it this way. Let's do it. It's really beautiful. Wow. Oh, wow. This is going to be amazing. There's no fast way to do this, folks. But fast isn't better. Look how nice that's going to be. Woo! For each batch I do and each process I do, I'm going to keep them separate so we can see the end result. So I'm going to continue doing this. Woo! Okay, I'm working on this next batch that I have not cooked yet at all. And what I've been doing is, with my scissors, like this, I've been chopping the fat into smaller chunks like this. And I'm going to show you, now, warning, this is something most people haven't seen, but I have pieces of fat that are in extremely large chunks like this. So your immersion blender isn't going to like you if you deal with this stuff directly. So I'm actually finding that it tears quite easily, and I'm just tearing it into smaller pieces. So I think this works, and I'm going to continue to do it this way. I think also that cooking it and then like cutting through the cooked fat when it's more soft, it actually works just as well. Or as it's cooking, using a spoon with kind of a sharp edge can just cut through it pretty easily, so you don't have to damage your electrical equipment. I suppose you could also put it through a food processor, but it just seems like kind of especially when you have a large amount like I'm dealing with, I don't think I really want to use my little kitchen tools. Like, this almost requires like an industrial, well, not almost, it certainly does require like an industrial size kind of equipment to handle this much. But if you're just rendering fat from a roast or something like that, then it's a whole other story. But I just want to show that even if you don't grind it, you can still, once it starts cooking, you can use like a sharp edge spoon and just start breaking it up, and it actually works pretty good. Hi, this is my setup. I'm just straining now the first batch that was done by the dry method. Then this is the second rendering and purification. So what I've got is my little screen with some layered cheesecloth, multiple layers of cheesecloth there, and I'm going to put it in this bowl. And I'm using a clear bowl because you can see on the bottom where the fat and the water are separating. So I just wanted to use something clear that I could actually see what is happening down there. So I'm going to finish this and then let this cool, and I'll see you later. Well, it's day 3 of my sheep tallow rendering. And I just can't believe it's taken me this long. When I started out, I was thinking I could finish in one day. But I realized with the quantity that I started, it's just not possible to do that quickly at all. So I just wanted to have my morning coffee with you while I prepare to get going on day 3. So I didn't film a lot of what I was doing yesterday, and it's because I was just so deeply immersed in it and playing with that fat, dealing with that fat all day long. Everything gets covered in it. My hands, I used like every bowl and pot that I had available. All of my crock pots were going, my electric roaster. I'm really only probably halfway finished. I really want to finish today. I'm going to continue with this. I hope that if this is something that you're interested in doing, that this video will help you figure out what not to do and what to do, and that all the mistakes that I'm making are going to help you do it better yourself the first time. So let me show you where I'm at, and let's get started. So this is what we have accomplished so far. This one here is finished, and I've put post-it notes on each batch so that I know what kind of process I did on each of them. Some of them have been done using the wet method, and some of them the dry method. And what I need to do today is a second purification. This one I actually spilled, I tipped it over and I made a mess, so it's not very nice. And these two were from the same batch. So I also have in my slow cooker, I have some that I have heated up again to purify, and I'm going to run this through my little sieve, and I'm going to pour it into my Pyrex dish to harden. So let's go. Now this is what's left in the water from the wet method. There's a lot of little tiny grains of fat, and I've just decided not to strain them out and put them in for purification because I think there's probably a reason why they didn't attach to the big brick. Maybe they are dirty, so I'm just going to leave them out. You can see this is what I've strained out of the bowls that are left over, and it is really dirty, so I think it's a good move. Well, I'm pretty happy because it didn't take me as long as I thought it would to get all of my product into the slow cookers for a second rendering and purification. So what I'm going to do is let that melt, and then I'm going to strain it and pour it into some molds, and then later when everything's cool, I can come back and I can show you all of my results and compare, and I'm going to give you all of my recommendations and suggestions for if you want to try this yourself. Yay! Now I just have some cleanup to do. Oh boy, well, I've finished, and it's time for me to show you my results. I've got 6 things to show you. I did things a little bit differently so I could just compare the different techniques and the results. So there were 2 different methods that I used, and I did them differently for each of these batches, just to understand how it works and the kind of result we can get. So the first method I tried was the dry method, and that was putting it in the fat in a saucepan and just letting it boil and adding a bit of salt but no water. Then the other method is to put the fat in a pot with water and salt. I have 3 results here, and I'll just explain to you what I have here. So this one was my first batch. I did 2 renderings. So the first one was to render it down, and then the second one was to purify it. And I got this idea from a website that uses sheep tallow or tallow for beauty products and moisturizers and things like that. I did all of these twice. This batch here, first I did a dry method, so no water. And then from that result, I purified it the second time using the wet method, slow cooking that in water and salt, and then straining out the result. This one here, I did a wet method both times. So the first time, put that in water and salt, let it harden, and then run it again through a water and salt process. This one here, I did first a wet method, and then I purified it using a dry method. And this was the result. And so what I found was the tallow that was made from the wet method seems to be cleaner. It has a very, very, very minimal odor that isn't offensive. Okay? And the texture, so the first batch, this was the first dry and then wet. It's a really nice texture. It actually reminds me a lot of like shea butter. It's kind of a bit more crumbly, but very moist. And I think it would work really nicely in a cosmetic. And actually, if I just take a bit, like a little chunk like this, it just melts in my hand, and I can moisturize my hands with that. That's very nice. It does have like a slight odor, but it's not offensive. So if you were to use this in a product, I think with some essential oils, it would be really nice. This one here was the wet and the wet. So first wet, second wet. And it too has more moisture in it. And it's very clean. So I'm happy with that, but it is hardened more profoundly. And this one was the wet method first and the dry method second. And it too, it has a little bit more of an odor, I would say. But it's more crumbly, like you can see, a lot like this one. Really, there's not a huge difference between these 3. Okay, so these are the second group of 3 that I want to show you. So these are the result of my experimenting with chopping or not chopping my fat chunks. So these all came from the fat, the leftover fat from the first rendering using the wet method. So when I finished my wet method, I would strain it, and I would still have large chunks of fat that were not melted. And so what I decided to do was take those leftovers and process them again to see what kind of product I could get out of that. So this first one here was this one actually was done, it had like it actually went through 3 processings. So the first one was the wet method, And then this was the leftovers of that. And then I did a purification of using the dry method. So I took the leftover chunks, I boiled them dry, and then I did a third purification using water and salt to draw out the impurities. And so that sounds pretty complicated, but the result is very soft, very crumbly, but this has a stronger odor than the other batches that I just showed you. And I would say that is the case for all of these for these leftover renderings that I did. This one is a lot more, this is just like hard candle wax. That's what it looks like to me. So it's the leftover from the wet method, and I rendered that using the dry method, and I didn't do any further purification of that. So this is just 2 renderings. Now this one, I did 3 processes to it, and this was the first leftovers of the wet method. Then I purified it using a dry method, and then I did that again. So it was like two purification, but I don't even want to call that purification. It was like three renderings, and it is quite soft, as if it has gone through a wet method, but there's a stronger odor. So these ones I definitely would not use in cosmetic at all, but I think they might be all right for using in cooking. So what did I learn in this process? First of all, this is better to do in small batches, especially if you're using just an average kitchen. If you have an industrial setup, that's a whole other story, but for the average person with the kitchen, you can make this with the equipment you have in your kitchen. It's very easy to do. If I were to do it again, and I probably will, I would do smaller batches, 5 to 10 pounds. So I want to say that I prefer one over the other in terms of the first 3 batches that I showed you. But honestly, there isn't really a big difference between the dry and the wet method. If you're going to do 2 renderings of it, I would say the second one should be the wet method, because it will draw out more of the impurities. The water method seems to be a little more gentle to pull out the impurities. And I think if you were just going to eat it, I don't know if this really makes a difference. But I think just psychologically, the idea of it being clean, like washed in water and salt, has more of a psychological appeal, but I'm not really sure that it really matters. It might be something that you just want to consider intuitively what you prefer. I have read that cooking with this kind of fat has a lot of wonderful nutrients in it and vitamins, and it has a really high heat tolerance, so you can use it for frying foods, and it's just a healthier fat to use for cooking, better than vegetable oils or seed oils. So I would say if you are being super health conscious, I would go with the double wet method. And if you're not so concerned, I would go with the dry method. I really don't think there's a big difference. Well, this video is getting so long. I just want to stop here, and I just want to share a few important things that I learned after making this tallow, and that is that you want to cook it between 220 degrees and 275 degrees. Don't let it go higher than 275. And you want to also make sure that your tallow doesn't have a lot of moisture in it, because the more moisture it has, the faster it will mold. I hope this helps you in your process of making tallow. And if you learned something in your experiences, please share them with me. And I will give an update if I do this again and what I do differently and how I actually use the tallow and the kinds of suggestions that come out of the practical use of the end product. So thank you so much for watching. If you are still here watching this, then just let me know in the comments. Say something like, I love sheep tallow. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll be back in the kitchen with more cooking videos coming up soon. Bye-bye.